This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review. Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review. I'm Dahlia Shendlin.
And I'm Gilad Halpern.
And if you like us, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. You just have to go to our homepage. That's tlv1.fm/Tel Aviv Review. Scroll to the bottom and click the big red button that says Patreon because we're counting on you. Every week, we bring you interviews with authors of books, research, and people who have produced what we consider to be fascinating material. This episode is the first in a new series sponsored by Tel Aviv University's Stephen Roth Institute for the Study of Contemporary Anti-Semitism and Racism. You can find the previous series featuring interviews about anti-Semitism and photography, so-called social Mendelism, and other fascinating topics on our website.
Our guest today is Radu Ioanid, the Romanian ambassador to Israel. He's also an associate professor in political science at the University of Cluj in Romania, where he got the first of his two doctorates, and the other was from the EHESS in Paris, which also happens to be my alma mater. He has published several books on the Holocaust and post-Holocaust history in Romania, including, most notably, The Ransom of the Jews, the story of the extraordinary secret bargain between Romania and Israel. It was originally published in 2005 and recently reprinted with updates by Roman and Littlefield. Just before his appointment as ambassador to Israel, he worked for 30 years between 1989 and 2020 for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And now we are absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Ambassador Radu Ioanid to the show. Hello and welcome.
Hello, this is my pleasure.
So before we start the discussion on your book, the very fascinating topic that you basically uncovered, let's start by discussing the recent history of Romania's Jews up until the starting point of the book, which is just after the Second World War. So if you look at Jews of Romania in the Second World War and looking back, say, several decades into the past, what did it look like? What was their story?
I would start, with your permission, a little bit earlier. I would start in the 19th century when we have a very strange setting. Romania is basically an anti-Semitic country. We have hundreds of thousands of Jews, and most of them living in Romania, and most of them are not citizens of Romania, although they have all the duties of a Romanian citizen. Namely, they are drafted into the army, they need to pay taxes, and so on and so on. And this is, to a certain degree, this anti-Semitism, official anti-Semitism, is influenced by the Tsarist anti-Semitism. Let's remember that two countries, Romania and Tsarist Russia, were neighbors at this point. But it's also homegrown, and it's mostly economical. Economical because the Jews are skilled, and they are basically sometimes very poor, but sometimes middle class, and they represent a competition to the emerging Romanian middle class. This situation lasts until the end of World War I, when because of the pressure of the Paris conferences, Versailles and the Paris conference, the Jews are given full rights in Romania. Not that anti-Semitism disappears. Au contraire, we are witnessing the appearance of two fascist parties, which together are the most free elections in the interwar Romanian history, will get almost 25% of the vote. So let us please remember that 1 in 4 Romanians was voting fascist and was voting anti-Semitic. I would, with your permission, emphasize that Romania was had the third Jewish community in terms of size in Europe. After Poland and after Soviet Union, we are talking about 760,000 Jews at the census of 1930. What was absolutely unique about that country, or this country, as you wish, was that it had the most diverse Jewish community. Let us remember, please, Ashkenazi Jews in Moldova, Sephardic Jews in the south, ultra-Orthodox Jews in Marmaros, Reformed Jews in Bukovina and in Transylvania, Romanian-speaking Jews, Ladino-speaking Jews, Yiddish-speaking Jews, Hungarian-speaking Jews. So it's a kaleidoscope of Jewish communities, extraordinarily diverse, some of them very modern, some of them very traditional. Extraordinary diverse.
And let's get to the war, because that's really where it all starting to change.
Oh. I was hoping. Since you asked apologies from us, I'm going to ask apologies from both of you for staying one more minute on the longer history, even going slightly further back, because sometimes I think all good things come from the Conference of Berlin. And the only reason I want to stop and ask about this in 1878 is because it seems like there's a very interesting moment where the world tries to pressure Romania to do better by its Jews, and that in itself has a backlash from within Romania. And I just thought if you could spend one more minute to give that context, then we can...
Yes, you are right. It was a very important moment, and it was a very interesting one, because basically, on paper, Romania agreed to give rights to the Jews and to give them citizenship. However, this was done in a very tricky way, namely that every Jew, with the exception of 888 veterans from the Independence War, which preceded the conference by 1 year, with this exception, every Jew who had to be naturalized through an individual, I insist on the word individual, vote of the Romanian parliament. So between 1878 and the end of World War I, we have a few dozens of Jews who have connections, who are famous, for whom some very rich or very influential politicians are vouching for, but otherwise nothing happens, because they say yes, but in fact they say no.
Nothing happens but a backlash of resentment.
Backlash of resentment, anti-Semitism. The truth is that there were some public figures who were very, very pro-Jewish, but in general, the Romanian top intelligentsia and the Romanian political class, with few notable exceptions, which are famous also, are anti-Semitic. And anti-Semitism, we like it or not, is part of the Romanian 19th century culture.
All right, now let's tell briefly the story of Romanian Jews during the Second World War, and then we can get to the crux of the...
This is, again, a very, very interesting story, because Romania is not an occupied country. Romania is a country which is an ally of Nazi Germany, actually the main ally of Nazi Germany on the Eastern Front. And Romania starts its own Holocaust, which has its own features. And yes, sometimes killings are happening in conjunction. I mean, German troops with Romanian troops, but mostly it's a Romanian operation. It's a Romanian operation done by the Romanian army, Romanian gendarmerie, and sometimes, especially at the beginning of the war, by civilians. The war was preceded by some pogroms. For example, during the Iron Guard regime in 1941, January, there was a Romanian Kristallnacht during which 120 Jews were killed. But and there were some other killings, even in 1940 in Galați and Dorohoi during the retreat of the Romanian troops from Bessarabia and Bukovina, which were lost to Soviet Union. But basically, massively, the Romanian Holocaust starts with the date of 22nd of June 1941, when Romanian alliance with Nazi Germany attacked Soviet Union. And this is when, especially in the northern part of the country, tens of thousands of Jews are killed by the Romanian troops, German troops, sometimes by Einsatzgruppe D. And this is when Romania interns Jews massively, tens of thousands, in makeshift transit camps. And this is when, during the fall of 1941, 150-something thousand Romanian Jews are deported to Transnistria. Transnistria being not to be confused, please, with today's Transnistria. It was a territory between the Bug and the Dniester, capital in Odessa, which was under Romanian occupation for most of the duration of the war. I'm talking summer of 1941 until the middle of the spring of 1944.
So this is not the same geographic region of today's Transnistria, which is essentially considered to be part of Moldovan territory.
Correct. This is what today's Transnistria is, a tiny sliver of territory. Then Transnistria was again a huge chunk of Ukraine, which anybody who looks at the map will see it. It's in between the Bug rivers and the Dniester, the other way around, actually going east, Dniester to Bug, with the capital in Odessa.
And tell us about the Antonescu regime. Who was Ion Antonescu? Why was he so central to this?
Ion Antonescu was a general, very ultra-nationalistic, very anti-Semitic, allegedly a good military officer who got into an alliance with the Iron Guard for a few months, from September 1940 until January 1941, when the Iron Guard rebelled under him, and he, Antonescu, with the blessing of Adolf Hitler, it's a very interesting chapter of Romanian history, crashes the Iron Guard and remains in power without a fascist regime. Why was this interesting? It was interesting because in Berlin, the Germans split when it came to Romania. Wilhelmstrasse, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Hitler, and the general staff of the German army sided with Antonescu. Why? Because Hitler was interested in two things in Romania. Besides law and order, he was interested in Romanian oil. Romania was a big oil producer and was interested in the Romanian army because he was planning to attack Soviet Union. SS, SD, and the Nazi party sided with the Iron Guards, but they were basically told by Hitler to stay away because his main interest was, again, oil and army, the Romanian army. So this is basically from where Antonescu comes. He was a Jew hater. He was a rabid anti-Semite. And he started immediately after the beginning of the war to literally cleanse the country of the Jews, starting with the northern part of the country, Bessarabia, Bukovina, and also Iași. Iași, for example, was a site of a huge pogrom. There were thousands of people killed in the streets of Iași, and then another few thousand were killed in a couple of death trains which were going through the countryside aimlessly until 60% of the people put on these trains died.
So at the end of the war, how many Romanian Jews remained in the country?
It's a good question. It's Romania, in spite of the savagery of at the beginning displayed by its troops and its administration at the beginning of the war, Romania basically witnesses the survival of half of its Jewry. Why is that?
So about 400,000?
I would say slightly about 300,000, maybe close to 350,000. Why is this huge rate of survivors? There are several factors. First of all, I need to make a parenthesis. I need to tell you that out of the 150-something thousand Jews deported to Transnistria 2 years later, only 50,000 are alive. So it's a killing field. Transnistria, massacres, ghettos, famine, typhus, and so on. But in spite of all of this, Romanian leaders were very opportunistic. They started to realize after the Moscow defeat of the Germans, and especially after Stalingrad, that something is not going well. And they didn't want the Russians in the country. They were extremely anti-Russian, and they were trying to courtship the British and the Americans and the British. And they realized that the Jews could become a bargaining chip, and they started to stop or to slow down the killings, to stop the deportations. I have to tell you that about 25,000 Roma were deported to Transnistria, and only half of them survived there. Terrible stories, cannibalism. I mean, not to be believed what happened there. Anyway, Romanian opportunism, to come back to your question, Romanian opportunism, the fact that Romania is paying a close attention of how United States reacts, and let's remember that starting with the very late 1943 and beginning of 1944, the War Refugee Board and President Roosevelt start to pay attention to the fate of late, but nevertheless it's something, to the fate of the Jews in Eastern Europe in general and also to the fate of the Romanian Jews. Everything goes into the direction of slowing down the rate of murder and the rate of maiming and the rate of killings. And even Romanians are even bringing back from Transnistria certain categories of Jews. So this is basically and roughly the explanation of the big rate of survival.
And it's interesting because this, say, opportunistic attitude towards the Jews is also something that characterized the attitude of the Romanian, the communist regime towards the Jews, as is the subject of your book, because there's no other way, no other word, no better word to describe it as simply trade. It was people for goods, for livestock. This is really the story
and cold
that you
cash.
uncovered.
Don't forget cold cash.
Of course, and cash. Yeah, but that's not the first time that it happened. And neither this, actually. I mean, tell us the story of how did it come about? And also, as you point out in the book, it's not unprecedented. It's not something that just happened with the Jews. There were other cases of people traded for goods and cash, etc.
I need to step back to the immediate period of the end of the war, because I need to talk for a couple of minutes, with your permission, about the beginning of the Aliyah toward Palestine, because Israel did not exist yet. So in 1944, we have several teams of people who are parachuted by Mi-9 to Romania. And between them, there is a certain Sheikh Dan, formerly Trachtenberg. He doesn't stay too long in hiding. He was tasked by the Jews from Palestine to help Aliyah, and also he was tasked by Mi-9 to find out where are the American and British POWs. He doesn't stay, as I said, too much underground, because he's parachuted in June 1944, 23rd of August 1944. Romania turns around and goes into the war against Nazi Germany. So he puts a British flag on his car and he becomes a British official. And he does, with Russian and Romanian secret services, or Soviet and Romanian secret services permission, Aliyah. It's semi-clandestine because the British hated this and the British were trying to block this, but not the Russians and not the Soviets and not the Romanians. Why I insist on this episode? Because he will come back later into the picture, having good connections with then Romanian intelligence. I'm sorry that I made this.
No, don't apologize. The story that you tell about this character really should be the subject of a Hollywood film. He's a great character.
Yeah, he was a very nice, very, very interesting person.
I lost count if he's a double or a triple agent or what.
No. He was, I think, straightforward.
Yeah, it was loyal to one cause.
Loyal to one cause before the creation of the state and after the creation of the state. He was Nativ, basically.
Nativ, maybe you can explain what Nativ is.
Nativ was one of the intelligence agencies of the State of Israel. Maybe it still exists on paper. Maybe I'm saying silly things now. But anyway, it had a very important role in the immigration of the Jews to Israel, to Aliyah. So this organized Aliyah by the Jews by the Jewish agency, by the Jews from Palestine until 1948. It's one thing. There is also a clandestine Aliyah. People are leaving by food, by illegally, whatever they can do in order to leave Romania. And then appears on the map the state of Israel. We are talking about 1948. At that point starts the first selling of the Romanian Jews. It's a very, very interesting story. It's a trade between the newly created state of Israel and Romania. Has nothing to do with secret services. It's basically Israel sends to Romania a businessman called Ephraim Ilin, and he gives against roughly 100,000 Jews, I repeat, 100,000 Jews, 2 shiploads of embargoed American oil drilling equipment. embargoed American oil drilling equipment. Why was this important? Romania was a big oil producer. Americans and British bombed the hell out, pardon my language, of Ploiești and the oil fields. Then the Russians and Soviet came and took everything else that remained unbombed, and they needed this oil drilling equipment for their economy. Truman said, no, I'm not selling oil drilling equipment to Romania because you are communist or in process of becoming communist. And Israel went around and gave this, interestingly enough, the Israeli legation in Bucharest got this type of instructions. If Ilyin succeeds, he'll be a hero. If he fails, we don't know him.
Yeah, it's a rule of thumb of espionage everywhere. But
and this is, pardon me, this is something that ends in 1953. We are dealing with the anti-Semitic trials in the Soviet camp, Slansky trial, Reich trial, Petroșcanu trial in Romania, the trial of Zionists in Romania, and nothing happens until 1958 when a new chapter of the selling of the Jews starts.
Tell us about that chapter.
Well,
and I mean, first of all, maybe how unique was it from Israel's perspective to be paying cold cash and goods for people? And how did Jews become a player in foreign policy of both Romania and Israel?
First of all, in 1958, Romania becomes very interested in improving the relations, commercial relations, economic relations with the West. And they start to sell Jews, but they don't like to touch cash. And here comes in the picture a British Jewish gentleman who lived in London. His name was Henry Jacober, who was originally from Transcarpathia. He did business before the war in Romania. And he gets in touch with the Romanian foreign intelligence. He is not dealing with bona fide commercial companies who is the Ministry of Agriculture. He deals only with the foreign intelligence from Romania. And the deal works like this. A family of who has relatives, a Jewish family who has relatives in Romania, contacts Jacober. Jacober contacts the Romanian foreign intelligence with a list of 5, 10, 15 Jews. I saw this list. I have this list. You can find on them, for example, the cousins and the relatives of Serge Klarsfeld from Paris, France. And they established a price per head, which is in general proportionate with the level of education or the importance of that family in terms of political past or so.
Because the justification for the Romanian authorities were to compensate for all that they invested in these people, right?
Later. At that point, there is no justification. It's just simple commerce. And the Romanians are saying, against the Klarsfeld family and against XYZ families, we want 10 landrace pigs, 12 cows, Dutch or Danish cows, 1 liter of bull sperm, and 2 hunting dogs.
Wouldn't anybody want that?
There was even, and it's not a joke, you'll see, there was even a private plane, a Romanian private plane, which flew something like 30 pigs from London to Bucharest. And this was a trade until sometimes like 1965, 64, 65, when re-enters the scene Shaikedan. Shaikedan goes to London and tells basically this gentleman that the Thames is deep, that he should get out, has a big fight with his boss, Shaul Avigur, who's a big figure in Israel, as you well know. And they
formerly the commander of the Haganah.
Exactly, and somebody who's in charge with exfiltrating Jews from Eastern Europe, from everywhere. They go to Ben Gurion both. Golda Meir is very silent, doesn't want to get involved in this fight. And Ben Gurion approves in writing this operation, in which the state of Israel takes over. Basically, Jacober is marginalized, and this is a deal between the Romanian foreign intelligence and Nativ. So Shaikedan meets with a certain General Marcu, who in 58 was a captain, very quickly he becomes a general because he's good at business. And they do a silly thing at a certain point. They meet in Switzerland, in Geneva, if I'm not mistaken, and Marco puts under a suitcase with $1 million, and this got lost. And he lands without the suitcase. It's a big scandal, and they are both expelled from, both Shaikedan and Marco are expelled from Switzerland for a while because of this no more granting access to the Swiss territory.
But it was eventually found.
It was found because the Swiss will not steal $1 million.
I'll remember that next time I lose a suitcase of $1 million.
And anyway, this business continues until 89. But kindly pay attention to the following aspect. It's not only cash per head, because cash per head is something up to $3,000, and the Israelis never paid for kids or old people. They paid based on the level of education. So more qualified was a person, closer you get to $3,000. However, besides this, you have two more levels of Israel paying Romania. One is the foreign trade. The balance, yearly balance, or imbalance actually, between Romania and Israel was favoring Romania. Romania always exported twice or more to Israel compared to what Israel exported to Romania. The difference was paid in cash every year. And then you have a third level, which is a level of loans. I think that you, ladies and gentlemen, would love to have a loan without interest, no? It's good.
Of course.
It's good.
It's excellent. So this is what was happening. Romania was getting every year tens of millions of dollars of loans, and Israel was paying the interest totally or partially based on the rate of how many people would leave Romania every year. At a certain point, especially after starting with the early 70s, you don't have more than 2,000 people per year, but it's a good source of cash, triple source of cash for the Romanian foreign intelligence, for the Romanian state. And then you have a few things on the side, a few Uzi machine guns for the bodyguards of Ceausescu, a Centurion tank from Lebanon through the Christian militias from there via Israel, and so on and so on. But basically, you have these three levels of the deal.
And how did it go down in both countries or in both camps? The Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc, because of course, it was all top secret, but still at the leadership and decision-making level, they had to justify it to themselves somehow. In Romania, the communists, of course, it wasn't very communist what they did. First of all, to distinguish between populations based on religion and ethnicity, but also attaching a capitalist price tag to them, trading people for money. And in Israel, and of course later with America as its patron, reinforcing the economy of a communist country. It's something that probably didn't go down very easily.
Yes and no. Politics, it's about cynicism, and it's about results. Deng Xiaoping used to say, it doesn't matter the color of the cat as long as it catches a mouse. Yeah, so this cat, from a Romanian point of view, Israeli point of view, was catching the mouse, was a good cat. There is something interesting here. First of all, let us please remember that as disliked as Ceausescu was, and he was a criminal, he's the only leader, and Romania is the only country which doesn't break diplomatic relations with Israel at the 67 war. This is one thing to be mentioned. Second thing, yes, they were selling massively Jews, but they sold in a different way, but nevertheless sold ethnic Germans to West Germany. West Germany tried to pick the brains of Israeli government and Israeli intelligence to find out how this worked. And occasionally they sold ethnic Romanians too, color of the money, no color on the money. So this is one part of the story. The other part of the story is that they were pretending that Israel is paying for the education of these people, which was, of course, nonsense, because education was free anyway. And the moment when the Americans said to Ceausescu, if you enforce the law, in terms of having the Romanians who are emigrating to US to pay for their education, no more MFN. And you know what Ceausescu's foreign minister said? He said, the law will remain on paper, will not apply to people who will not enforce it when it comes to people who lived for the United States. So it's flexibility, But also we need to remember that Eastern Germany sold ethnic Germans to Western Germany. Saddam Hussein sold Jews.
Which means that Israel was also buying from different places.
Of course, but we need to be careful here because in my view, and I strongly believe this, it's one thing to buy a slave, and it's another thing to sell it. And to have it. First to own it and to sell it. So I think that morally it's much, much better to buy a slave than to own a slave and to sell it.
To liberate and redeem them.
Okay,
Exactly.
but I just want to take a minute and think about the consequences of this from Israel's perspective, because ultimately Israel was forced to both show some political support to Ceausescu to cover their tracks in a way, and also basically chummying up with Ceausescu while Ceausescu was busy cultivating some of Israel's worst enemies in the 1970s.
Correct.
Was there any problem or complication with that for Israel's actual position, let alone its image, and even in the long term? I mean, I know this is a pile-on question, but is there a consequence for Israel today in Romania for having been friends with Ceausescu now that he's gone?
I think that first of all, we need to remember that it was a complicated situation in terms of Israel internally, because journalists are journalists, and when this is hidden from them, they don't like it and they try to uncover it. So this created a problem in Israel. And also in Romania, a lot of Jews knew that Romania is paying for those who reach Israel. Now, all the details about how this worked, how much it was paid, what the layers, the 3 layers, which I already mentioned, this wasn't, of course, known. Now, when we talk to morality and politics, this is something where very often they don't match or they don't go together. First of all, Ceausescu was supported until a certain point by United States because in spite of the fact that he was a national socialist, I mean, very close even to fascism when it comes to certain aspects of his policies, in spite of the fact that he allowed a certain amount of anti-Semitism in Romania in a certain press, not anti-Zionism. This is very interesting. After 1958, you don't find in the Romanian press anti-Zionist articles, but you do find anti-Semitic articles in the 70s and 80s. Certain press. And he wasn't repressing this, he was tolerating this, although the US Congress protested against this. So it's a complicated situation, and it becomes more and more complicated because Ceausescu becomes more and more oppressive. And on the international scenes appears somebody like Gorbachev, who it's a completely different brand of communism. Do not speak about the Italian communists or what we call then Euro-communists, who were very far from this savage type of Stalinism, which was dominating Romania until 1989. Now, if this has anything to do with today's Romania, I am not so sure because look, as I said, Romania sold ethnic Germans, Romania even sold ethnic Romanians. So I don't think that this is an issue. For me personally, and for some of my colleagues and many of my friends in Romania, I want to tell you that for me, Romania, I resent this operation for a different reason. I think that Romania is poorer today because it has a skeleton of a Jewish community. The Jews are gone. From 760,000 Jews in 1930, we might have now 4,000 Jews, mostly old. And this is a tragedy for Romania because the Romanian Jews had an extremely important role in the modernization of Romania and in the prosperity of Romania. at grassroots level, economic grassroots level. So it's a tragedy, I think, and I don't think that we'll be lucky enough to come back to a better world from this point of view.
I want to go back 1 second before we move on to the repercussions again, back to the story of the trade itself. What was Romania's interest in doing that other than taking in cash? Because it could have gone in the 1950s, 1960s, to the Soviet Union, which was the leader of the bloc, and it was a regional superpower, an economic powerhouse. Instead of doing all sorts of double dealings with Israel in exchange for the Jews, it was a rather complicated operation. Instead of just straightforward economic exchange that other countries in the Warsaw Pact sphere did, but also, sorry to pile up again,
we have so many questions.
But also, how did it? What were the repercussions for other communist countries? Did they try to sell off the Jews as well? Because, as we know, in the Soviet Union, they tried so hard to keep the Jews from going. Why didn't? Or maybe it was suggested in the 1980s, when the Soviet Union economy, was in tatters, to relive that same model in Soviet territories.
So I will try to answer your many questions, and you please let me know what I didn't answer, because
we have more. We can't stop.
Okay.
Whatever you don't get to, we're just going to have to leave it for the next interview.
So first of all, relationship with Soviet Union and after let us remember 1956, the Soviets are pulling out military from Romania. 1964, it's an open fight in between the two countries, because Soviet Union wanted to relegate Romania to the level of corn and a grain producer, and Romania had its own ambitions to become an industrialized country. So the relationship was never good. So this is one after 1964. And in 1968, although Romania had a Stalinistic regime, it sided against Soviet Union and against the rest of communist regimes, sided with Dubček, with Prague Spring, and with the Dubček regime. This was again a snub to the Soviets. So this is one explanation why. And they needed cold cash, but there is another aspect of this story. In case you didn't know, and I'm sorry to say this in a crude way, an anti-Semite thinks that the Jew is running the world, and the Jews are running the world, and normally Israel was running the world. So communist regimes saw Israel as a door to an indirect door to Washington. And let us think about the fact that there are maybe other countries and maybe later other regimes which are
exactly they're not alone. Yeah.
But the story is that this was another way of thinking in Bucharest. Maybe via Tel Aviv, via Jerusalem, we can do something. We can do something in terms of opening doors in Washington. And it's a funny story. At a certain point, Ceausescu said, "Listen, guys," in his bad Romanian, not that he knew another language, but his Romanian was bad. He said, Moses, this was Rabbi Moses Rosen, Moses was better than you guys in Washington in getting us the MFN. Because Rabbi Moses Rosen, the chief rabbi of Romania, knew very well how to play his good connections with the American Jewish Committee, with the World Jewish Congress, with Bnei Brit, and so on. So there was this reflex, which was an anti-Semitic reflex, actually. And again, let us remember, it's a country which doesn't break diplomatic relations with Israel in 1967, with the exception of Hungary, which took a small amount of money in the early 50s from every Jew who was emigrating to Israel. And with the exception of Eastern Germany, which was selling Germans as crazily, I don't know about any other country, communist country, doing this. This was beyond their principles.
Well, we're going to have to really severely limit the number of questions left, but I do want to ask you about where things stand now. And part of the reason is that We have interviewed other people on this show who have thought about the memory of the Holocaust in the post-communist era. We had Jelena Subotic a while ago, who's written a great deal about Holocaust memory in some of the countries of the former Yugoslavia and other places. And I'd like to hear from you how Romania remembers its legacy of how they dealt with the Jews during the Holocaust and during the communist era following 1990.
And of course, the trade of the Jews. How prominent is it in the contemporary debate?
Yeah, so first of all, in terms of the Holocaust memory, there was no Holocaust memory during the communist regime in Romania except Transylvania. Basically, we Romanians are good, we protected the Jews, nothing happened here, a few thousand people here, there, but it's only the Germans. In northern Transylvania, this is bad. Hungarians, hand in hand with the Germans, killed massively the Jews. We are good, Hungarians are bad. After the fall of communism, what followed in Romania was an absolute disaster because the public discourse and was Holocaust denial. And it was dominated by this theme until 2003, when Elie Wiesel chaired a commission, an international commission on the Holocaust in Romania, which had a Romanian general, Ionescu, Mihai Ionescu as vice president. I was American vice president, and Tuvia Freeling, who then was the chief archivist of Israel, was the Israeli vice president. And this report, which was endorsed by the Romanian government, successive Romanian governments and presidents, slowly but surely turned the country around. Namely, they built a massive Holocaust monument. I'm saying they because at that point I was still working for the US government. A major monument for the memory of the Jews and Roma killed in Romania was built in Romania. A Wiesel Institute was created, and this institute deals with Holocaust denial, with the memory of the Holocaust, with fights anti-Semitism, and does Holocaust education. I will not deny to you that in Romania there is anti-Semitism basically without Jews today, especially on social media. But the politicians are very careful. Some of them got educated. Some of them are careful because it's better to not be on the wrong side. And in any case, the political class is truly, truly careful. And we are building now a major museum of the history of the Romanian Jewry and the Holocaust. So I would say that compared to certain countries in Europe, some of them being neighboring countries of Romania, officially there is no Holocaust denial, there is no Holocaust distortion. Yes, there are people who don't know enough, there are people who are saying silly things, and we do have our own anti-Semites, of course.
Yeah, well, we've got plenty more questions, but we've run out of time, so we've got to leave it there. So we'd like to thank you very much, Ambassador Radu Ioanid, for coming on the show and talking to us about many things, including your book, The Ransom of the Jews, the story of the extraordinary secret bargain between Romania and Israel, reprinted now by Roman and Littlefield. Thank you very much.
And I would just like to add that we also read the report that you talked about because it was sent to us. And so we have tried to bring in what little we could of much material, but that seems to have been a very key report.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And also big thanks to Itai Shalem, the manager of TLV1 Studios, and to our producer, Ariel Cohen, and of course to the Roth Institute for the generous support in supporting this episode. And now we've got a request because most of you listen to us on the Apple Podcasts app, and we'd like to ask you to please consider writing us a review of any kind. Good, bad, ugly, whatever. You too can support us by going to our website and subscribing onto our Patreon campaign. Check out our archive. It has well over 700 interviews by now, I think. Like us on Facebook, follow me and Dalia on Twitter and the podcast as well. And of course, do not forget to join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. And until then, from Dalia and from me, goodbye.